everyone and welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. Today I'll be chatting a bit with my friend and driving partner, Buddy. Most of you are already familiar with the name, so today you'll get the opportunity to put a face to the name. Stay tuned. Buddy, it's really good to have you here with me today. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
I am fine, thank you. Today we're in a different kind of setting, and instead of focusing on the road, we can focus a bit on each other. We all know that you love to drive, but besides your driving, today we would like for you to tell us something about yourself.
Well, I was born in Evanston, Illinois. That's a town about 20 miles outside of Chicago. But my family left Illinois in 1958, and by way of Tennessee and Georgia, which I went to school in those two states for one part of the year and then the other part in the other town, we came to New York. We finally ended up in New York in 1959. I was in the third grade when I came here, and I had 4 brothers and 2 sisters at that point. My teacher's name was Miss Bear. She was a pretty lady that I'll never forget. And then in the 4th grade, I had a teacher named Mr. Maevsky, who was my favorite teacher of all my teachers throughout all my school years.
What was the first school that you attended when you came to New York?
I went to a school called PS 92.
Is that school still around today?
The building that I actually attended was torn down a number of years ago, but they built up a new building and has since even expanded that one. But yes, the school itself, by name PS 92, is still there.
I know this is something you have probably never given thought to, but about how many kids attended that school at the time you attended?
Yeah, you said it right. That is definitely something I would have to think about. Let me see, it went from kindergarten to 6th grade. There were probably about 3 classes to 4 classes per grade, and probably an average of 30 some odd students per class. I'd have to get out my calculator. There were quite a few kids there. There were quite a few people who went to PS 92.
Attending school back in the days, what kind of subjects did you do back then?
Well, we had reading, writing, arithmetic, social studies, science, physical education, hygiene. Well, now that I think about it, we had quite a few subjects in even elementary school.
Can you remember any of the books you used in school? For example, I remember using a book called 65. Do you remember any of the books you used?
No, I don't really remember any of the story books. I do remember that we had math books, we had science books, we had social studies books, we had English books. But the exact book, I cannot tell you.
Okay. What were some of the foods that you would get at school in the canteen?
Mashed potatoes, mixed vegetables, chicken, hot dogs, French fries, milk, juice, fruits.
And at home, what kind of foods would your mother prepare for you?
I used to love her chili and her fried chicken with her mashed potatoes, her sweet potatoes, collard greens and cornbread. And my mother made a fish. She made a little of everything. And I lived also with my grandmother, who was the second cook in the house, who also cooked very well.
Did you have a favorite food then?
Well, my favorite part of the chicken was the breast, and I used to love to come home and have fish and fries on Fridays. Generally, I liked all. Okay.
What kind of fast food places did you have back then?
Well, there was a place we called Burger and Shake that was on Northern Boulevard and 102nd Street in Corona, which all the neighborhood cronies would frequent. And then, of course, there was White Castle. That was in Jackson Heights on 88th Street. They made some delicious burgers and fries and some of the best shakes you ever want to taste. But the thing that was highlighted most was their hamburgers were only 10 cents and the cheeseburgers were 12 cents. Can you imagine that? And they were delicious. So we go down there with $1 or $2 and we come back with a sack of burgers. I mean, everybody just be full to the gills.
Is that the same White Castle that I heard of, which was closed recently?
The very same. That White Castle has been on Northern Boulevard and 88th Street since 1935, 24 years before I came here. I'm really going to miss that place. It was really great.
Was McDonald's around then?
No, McDonald's didn't come on the scene, or at least in that area, until 1972.
What about Wendy's or Popeyes?
Didn't hear anything about them.
On numerous occasions while we're on the road doing my videos, we'll pass a Carvel ice cream shop and you'll mention Carvel ice cream. Could you just tell us a bit about the Carvel ice cream shops?
Yeah, Carvel ice cream has been around a long time, about 93 years from what I understand, and that was one of the ice cream places we used to go as often as we could, and they made such a variety of ice cream. They had the soft ice cream machines where the ice cream would come out in swirls, and we would get the banana boat, the ice cream sundae, the chocolate, strawberry and vanilla shakes, ice cream sandwiches, a little of everything from that store, and I thought it was the best ice cream out.
As for myself, I've never had a banana split, and my first banana split that I will be having, it will be from an Carvel ice cream shop. So when I have it, you'll probably hear about it. After elementary school, which school did you attend?
I went to junior high school 16.
And that is in Queens here, right?
That was in Queens, yes.
Is there anything you can remember from junior high school which you still remember today?
Yeah, that was when I started playing the tenor saxophone, and I loved it. We'd have music 5 times a week, all year long.
Can you still play the sax?
Well, after I got out of school, I didn't play it anymore. Now I'd be rusty as I don't know what, but playing it for the years that I did, I could still read the saxophone music. Yeah, I played sheet music, not by ear.
Why did you choose the sax over other instruments?
Well, I got some advice from my older brother who played the trumpet. My oldest brother and my brother under him also played a multitude of instruments. Whatever he could get his hands on, he played. But I asked my older brother what did he think when I had the chance to take music, and so I said, well, should I play the trumpet? Because he played the trumpet. But he said, no, that's a little difficult. Try a wind instrument. Tenor sax, I think, is good. And so I tried the tenor sax, and that was an instrument that size-wise, sound-wise, and every-wise, I liked it.
And do you still play the sax today?
No, I do not.
Do you play any musical instrument today?
No, I just tinker around with the drums and maybe tinker around with the keyboard. But I think having that, what can I call it, school discipline is really what made me continue to play the sax for as long as I did. But then once I got out of school, I just didn't pick it up anymore.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
After junior high school, which high school did you attend?
Newtown High School in Elmhurst, New York.
And how was high school life back then?
Well, there was a little more freedom. You know, you felt a little more grown up the way you would change your classes and so forth and so on. I loved the athletics, you know, because I ran track and did a little high jumping, little broad jumping in high school, and those were good years.
Can you remember any of your teachers, or who was the principal back then at Newtown High School?
No, I don't remember the principal, but I do remember the gym teacher, Mr. Lavelle, and as a matter of fact, I ran into a teacher one day, years later. I was on the job on the bus, and I saw this gentleman standing in the bus stop, head full of white hair, you know, and I said, man, that looked like my teacher, Mr. Redmond, which I hadn't seen since, 1969, I think? And this is like in the 90s, I believe. And so he got up on the bus and he was talking to another gentleman, and I heard the voice and I said, man, that sounds like Mr. Redmond. So I said to him, sir, is your name Mr. Redmond? And so he said, yes, how do you know? Who are you? And I said, well, I was one of your students in high school. So yeah, I do remember some of my teachers, yes.
After high school, did you attend college, or did you just go straight into the working force?
No, I went into the working force, and I didn't go to college. I went to Bible school. I did a 3-year general course in Bible school with a 3-year general diploma, and I think it was about a year of evangelism, a year of homiletics.
Okay, so that would mean that you know your Bible pretty well.
Not as well as I should, but I do know a couple of things, more than just St. John 3:16.
Okay, so what is your favorite verse from the Bible?
Hebrews, I think, probably 11 chapter, for without faith it's impossible to please God. Those who come to God must first believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.
You said you didn't attend college, you went directly into the workforce. What was your first job?
Well, my first job was long before I even got out of school. It was with a summer program called Manpower, where they hired us during the summer to work different jobs in the community. And my first job was cleaning the park, Flushing Meadow Park, which is the old World's Fairgrounds. And they paid us, I believe it was about $37 and change per week. And we got paid at a place that used to be a bank years ago, but it closed down, the bank itself. And so they used it as a community center, which now houses what's called Antioch Baptist Church. But that's where I got my first paycheck. But outside of high school, once I finished high school, then I went to work for a company called Power Movers. It was a moving company. They paid well, and we were young and strong, so we figured to go out and, use a little bit of brawn and not so much brain, but after we learned that it's better to use the brain than the brawn.
What job did you have after that one?
Well, I did security. My stepfather worked he was in security, but he did a second job at Mays Department Store in Jamaica in security. And so he told me about that job, and I got a job there. And from there, I got another job with a company called Duffy Security, where I was working 2 jobs at the same time. And from Duffy Security, I got a job with Home Security. And from Home Security, I worked in security for Toshiba. Toshiba was a consumer electronic warehouse. Toshiba standing for Tokyo Shibari Electric Company in Japan. And I worked with the warehousemen, even though I was part of security, and they liked the way I worked. And so they hired me on to work at Toshiba, which I stayed there for like about 7 years. I became a foreman and then a warehouse supervisor. And they moved to Wayne, New Jersey, and well, I wasn't working with them anymore. And so for about a year, I was out of work.
Growing up with a lot of siblings, how was your family life back then? Did you quarrel a lot, or were you all just a loving family?
Well, there was 7 of us, and then in 1962, the 8th came along, my youngest brother. I think for the most part, we were a pretty peaceful family. My mother didn't take a whole lot of nonsense, nor my grandmother, and I lived with my stepfather at that point, and he didn't like for us to have trouble either. But nevertheless, we had our squabble, our sibling rivalries. But for the most part, I would say generally we all got along. I loved all my brothers and my sisters. I think for the most part we got along pretty well.
What kind of games did you play then?
We played community games, hide and seek, manhunt, some card games, spades and poker and dodgeball and baseball and basketball, and we had a lot of different things to do. I mean, we were pretty athletic as a family. My mother even would get involved with us sometime, and we raced up and down 34th Avenue, bicycle riding, and we did quite a bit of stuff.
Besides the games and playing on the streets and stuff, what kind of toys did you have back then?
Well, I had HO scale trains, the little electric race cars that ran on the track. I had a rocket launcher set, which I was really kind of disappointed with that. I got it for Christmas. And, I saw the commercial on television, the smoke coming up and the rocket takes off and, it's going. And so I got it at home, and they had some sort of little powder. I think you were supposed to put water in. It was supposed to make a simulated kind of smoke. And that rocket just never took off the base. I was so disappointed. Not realizing that commercials weren't reality. I mean, they were just to sell the product. Yeah, we had quite a few different toys back then. Little guns and.
Talking about toys, somebody probably hear me ask you this and say, why is she asking him that kind of question? But what year did the Barbie and Ken dolls came out?
Barbie and Ken?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't really into dolls. So.
I know, but I would just like to know what year did they...
Oh, it was back in the 60s. Exactly what year I couldn't tell you, but it was back in the 60s, yeah.
Okay, moving forward, we know very much that you love to drive. So I'm presuming that you had a car from, you were pretty young. What was your first car?
My first simulated dashboard, it was called a Remco Firebird 99. I think my mother bought that car for me when I was about 6 years old maybe. But I think what really inspired me about cars was my father always had multiple cars. He'd have like 2 cars and a truck at the same time. And he would take his family and neighborhood kids to do the food shopping in town. And we ride in the back of the truck while naturally he was driving. And so I was really kind of impressed with the cars. I liked the cars he had. He was a good driver. He would take a long distance rides and everything, you know. But then my mother bought me the dashboard. It was called a Remco Firebird 99, as I said before. It had an operating horn. The horn would really blow. The steering wheel would really turn. The signal lights you can put on, the flashers. The windshield wipers really work with her windshield. And I'd sit it on the table and I would pretend that I was driving, you know. And you know, and what's really kind of funny, years later, I was a grown man and my mother surprised me with a Christmas present again. And it was a Remco Firebird 99. I didn't even know they still made those things after so many years. But I guess coupled with my father and the dashboard, it probably gave me a real inspiration to drive myself. And so driving is something I've always been interested in, something I've always wanted to do. Having said all that, my first car that I owned personally that was registered in my name was a 1966 American Motors Rambler.
Can you remember how many cars you had, and can you remember the names of some of them?
I've had a lot of cars. Chevy Biscayne station wagon, Chevrolet 1970 Chevrolet Nova, 1968 Ford Mustang, a Chevy Lumina, 1991 Toyota Camry, 2001 had 2 of those Toyota Camrys, a 2002 Toyota Camry, 1964 and 5, and 1998 Honda Accord. A 2007 Camry, a 2006 Cadillac STS, and I'm sure there were a few more that I missed, but yeah, I had quite a few cars.
Buddy, being around so long, did you get a chance to meet any of the United States president or anybody really important?
Well, indirectly, I guess you could say 2 people actually. One was the Reverend Jesse Jackson when he was running for president years ago. I was on the bus, so I worked for transit at that time, and I was on the airport bus, and he came into the Marine terminal, and I was able to get his autograph. I told him it was for my son. When I met him, I said, Mr. Jackson, can I have your autograph for my son? And he says, name? That was all he said, you know. And so I thought to myself, now if I was a young lady, he probably would have been much more cordial than he was with me just now. But nevertheless, he did give me an autograph. And another time, again, I was on the bus to Q33, and I was in Manhattan, and I saw the former governor of New York, Governor Mario Cuomo. And I looked and I said, that's a real distinguished looking gentleman standing over there in the corner. He looked so familiar. And then I looked a little closer. I said, hey, that's Governor Cuomo. And so I said, I got to get this guy's attention. And so I picked up the PA system and I said to the people, there goes our former governor standing over there on the right. when we passed by, I want everybody to wave at him. And so it seemed like he could feel me looking at him almost, and he looked directly in my eyes, and I said with my mouth, I kind of lip synced his name, and he kind of shook his head, and as we went by, everybody just said, "Hey, Mr. Cuomo." So even though I didn't meet him directly, I felt like really I met somebody important that day, and he was just so friendly in his wave, you know.
You know, you were talking about Jesse Jackson. I also had the opportunity of meeting him. I think this is like maybe decades apart from when you met him, but I was in LaGuardia Airport in 2019. I was with my other co-workers, and he was passing through. He was really friendly. We got the chance of taking some pictures with him. We stayed there and we talked for maybe about 15 to 20 minutes. It was a real nice experience. So yes, my experience was a real pleasurable one meeting Jesse Jackson. You mentioned driving the bus. What year did you go to New York City Transit?
1983. That was September 12th, 1983.
Having lived through so many decades, what historic events can you tell us about which happened here in the United States?
Well, I remember when the first astronaut, Alan Shepard, went into space, 1961. I remember when J.F. Kennedy was assassinated in 63, when Robert Kennedy was assassinated in 68, and also Martin Luther King assassinated in 68. I remember the World Trade Center in 2001.
Do you know anyone that died in the 9/11 incident?
Yeah, indirectly though. I do know people that were in the World Trade and escaped with their life, but one New York City Transit police officer that was also housed in the same depot that I was in, he lost his life.
Talking about that horrible event, I would like for us to take a moment of silence for all the lives which were lost. One thing I'm surprised you didn't mention when I asked about the historic events here in the United States was the World's Fair, which was held in the Flushing Meadows Corona Park. Would you like to tell us something about that? Because I'm sure you were there, and I guess other people would like to hear something from someone who was at the actual event.
Yeah, it was definitely an historic event. I mean, what an extravaganza. It was beautiful. It was walking distance from the house. We didn't really have a lot of money at that time, you know, the kids in the neighborhood, but what some kids would do, they would go and they get their wrist stamped with some sort of stamp that an ultraviolet light would pick up. They would go and spend a little time, and then they would come back and they rub their wrists together with the other kids and put a little bit on their arms so that they can go and have a good time also. You know, you have your way of doing things in the hood. In the events, it seemed like the countries that participated brought their best exhibits. The Futurama building, which was General Motors, I think, you know, and they would take you through on these roller coaster cars, kind of real slow, and they would show you the future, you know, that's future cities and so forth and so on. And man, it was really, really, really lovely.
Before the World's Fair came to Flushing Meadows Corona Park, what was the park like, and was it a place you would always visit before?
No, I really didn't always visit. It was just a big piece of land, you know, it was just grass and trees and so forth and so on. But that, as I was also the place where I had my first job with the community to clean the park up. And when the World's Fair was expected to come, they really started rebuilding the roads and making the twisting and winding roads. They really cleaned the park up and redeveloped it.
What were some of the things you saw at the World's Fair?
Well, I saw futuristic cars, futuristic buildings, water ski shows. I remember one thing that stood out in my mind when I saw this double tanker. I think it was an oil truck or gas truck, and it had these two squarish instead of a long cylindrical type tanks. It had two kind of square tanks that weren't too long, but I remember the cab of that truck just being so futuristic, man. It just had us in awe, you know, the kind of jaw-dropping kind kind of exhibits they had.
What kind of cars did they have at the World's Fair then?
Well, it was a 1963, I believe, or the Ford Mustang. It was the first Ford Mustang that came out. It was a convertible, and I think that time they were only like $3,000, a little more than $3,000 the cost of them. They had the first turbo, which was a 1965 Ford Thunderbird, not turbo, but turbine engine in that car.
Okay, you said that at the World's Fair you saw futuristic buildings and futuristic cars. That was 1964, 1965. Are you seeing any of those cars now on the roads?
Oh yeah, you see some cars that look something like those cars back then. They don't look so futuristic now to us because, well, things change slowly and we adjust along with, the change. And so when they come, they just look normal. But if you were to take one of these cars now back to the World's Fair and put it in the World's Fair, everybody would just say, wow. Because some of these cars nowadays do look like the cars that they exhibited in the World's Fair in 63, 64.
Well, for me, two things that stand out at the World's Fair is the Unisphere. You know that Unisphere was built by United States Steel and it is 12 stories high. Whenever you see the Unisphere, you know that you're looking at Flushing Meadows Corona Park. And another thing are those two relics at the World's Fair Marina. Most people pass there and they're wondering, what are those things? But I remember you telling me before that those were used as bus shed. Could you elaborate on those a bit for us?
Yeah, they had the little transportation trains that the companies would use to take the people throughout the park to the different exhibits. And those bus shelters, which not even today to me still has a futuristic shape, were used to, the shelter and the people until they waited for the buses to come. And the Unisphere, still, every time I see the Unisphere, I'm still saying, what a beautiful work of art. They really did some fantastic job on the Unisphere. And it's just, to me, it's one of the best parks around. I've been to a lot of parks, but Flushing Meadow Park is, to me, one of the most relaxed, inviting parks there is around.
Buddy, how much has Corona changed since you came here?
Demographically, a lot. The ethnic groups, even the religious institutions, which when I came to Corona, the Jewish synagogue on 101st Street and 34th Avenue was still being occupied by worshipers, by Jewish worshipers. Now it's, I think, an AME church. It's still operated by a religious organization, but it's no more Jewish. And it was predominantly African American, I believe, when I moved here. But there were still Italians and Jews and African Americans here, and not so many Hispanics at that time. But now it's, I believe, predominantly Hispanic speaking people. But it's still a mixture of people here.
Was Corona violent at any time?
Yeah, there was violence in Corona because you had plenty gangs, a number of gangs in Corona, and then there was the Black Panthers, but the Panthers here on the East Coast were not considered violent. They were really community activists. They just carry that negative connotation that the Black Panther name carried. But it was still relatively peaceful.
I was told that the strip on Northern Boulevard between 97th Street and 108th Street, somewhere about there, was a very dangerous place to be at one time. How true is that?
Yeah, at one time, like I said, when there was a lot of gang activity, but I found that if you mind your business, you could avoid a lot of the trouble that went on. But I think the strip, probably more between 102nd and 105th Street was the more dangerous, because that's where the gangs kind of hung out their center spot. And it was called Vietnam at that time.
Okay, so what year did all that gang stuff kind of subside?
I would say the late 60s, maybe early 70s. It didn't really disappear, but it was pretty insignificant at that time. What's going on now, I really don't know.
Are you a member of a church?
Yes, I'm a member of Mount Oliver Gospel Church in Corona, where Bishop Sheldon Ferguson is the presiding bishop and pastor for the last, since 1981.
I have visited Mount Olivet Gospel Church on several occasions, and I can tell you from personal experience, it is a very welcoming place. The Bishop Sheldon Blair Ferguson, he's a very nice person, he's down to earth, and if you ever have anything you want to talk to him about, you can surely do so. Bishop Sheldon Blair Ferguson, it is a real pleasure knowing you. I know you can sing because I've heard you before. Do you sing at church?
Yeah, I do sing with the choir and the men's group, yeah, and the praise and worship team.
Is there a song you'd want to sing a few lines for us?
Are you putting me on the hot seat here?
Yes, I am.
Oh, wow. Let me see. There's one that goes, Jesus, you're the center of my joy. All that's good and perfect comes from you. You're the heart of my contentment, hope for all I do. Jesus, you're the center of my joy. And now I'll take it easy on your ears.
That was beautiful. Thank you very much. As you may have noticed, we did not talk much about Buddy's bus driving years, but what I will be doing, I will be coming with a part 2, so you can definitely look out for that video. Buddy, I want to thank you for taking the time out to join us here today, for giving us some insight about yourself, and thank you very much for the history lessons. And viewers, thank you for taking your time out to join us.